This is an audio tour of the dining room of the Duldig studio. Originally the Duldig family's dining room, this room showcases works of art from across the spectrum of the 20th century, from all periods of my parents' lives and from all the different places in which they lived and worked. Photos on the table show the room before it was renovated, with the original fireplace still intact, and, apart from the replacement of the fireplace by shelving, the arrangement of the room is as it was before my father died. If there's one work of art in the collection that you would take with you to a desert island, it is this mask in Salzburg marble. It's dated 1921 and was selected by Karl's teacher, Professor Anton Hanak, to represent his students in an international exhibition in Munich. A critic at the time in the German art journal called it Karl Duldig's fabulous mask. Carved directly into the stone without any preliminary drawings or models, it demonstrates Karl's ability to handle this difficult medium. Salzburg marble is one of the hardest carving stones, and also it demonstrates the extraordinary breadth of his youthful exuberance and imagination. The portrait of an old Viennese lady by my mother was done whilst she was a student at the Viennese School of Art for Women and Girls, before she became a student of Anton Hanak in 1921. She felt that this work exemplified her expertise as a painter in oils, and she made sure the painting had a prominent place in all the houses in which we lived. It could happily take its place in any museum of classical art. It is, however, also interesting to see Slava's development as an artist through the 20th century. The portrait of Mary Davis, Principal of St. Catherine's, was entered in the Archibald Prize in 1956. Slava was head of art and craft at St. Catherine's from 1947 to 1963. The painting demonstrates how her palette, technique and approach to her subject had developed and changed during her time in Australia. After her retirement from St. Catherine's, Slava worked intensively on her own art. She used coloured inks to create this vibrant monoprint, Tree in Spring. The work not only demonstrates Slava's ability to respond to stylistic changes in 20th century art, but also shows how she constantly explored and experimented with different mediums and techniques. Throughout his life, Karl enjoyed working on portrait busts. This exceptional portrait of a Malayan boy was completed in 1939 while we were living in Singapore. The young man was a ball boy at the courts where Karl was playing tennis. It was immediately admired, and in 1939 a journalist in the Straits Times wrote the following. Hitler came to Vienna, and in those few hours Karl Duldig, sculptor and sportsman, lost his career, his fortune and his home. He is now in Singapore, literally carving out a new life for himself with his chisel, his long fingers, and the clay he almost makes speak. People see with their eyes, but Karl Duldig sees with his eyes and his hands. This photo shows my father at work on the head of the Malayan ball boy. The photo was taken in the studio of the Italian sculptor Rudolfo Norli, who had kindly given Karl space to work. Robert Payne, a young Englishman who then worked for the British Admiralty in Singapore, immediately commissioned a bronze cast of the Malay boy. Payne later became famous. His books published by Thames and Hudson included a biography of Gandhi, as well as books on Caravaggio and Leonardo, examples of which are on the shelves of the bookcase in this room. In September 1940, our family was classified as enemy aliens by the British authorities in Singapore, and we were deported from Singapore to Australia on the Queen Mary, then a converted troop ship. Together with approximately 250 other refugees, we were then interned into Tura, Victoria. However, until the fall of Singapore to the Japanese in February 1942, Karl received regular, censored letters from his friends in Singapore, including Robert Payne, but this contact was lost during the war. In 2006, I received an email with an attached image of a bronze Malay boy that included my father's clear signature. The email came from the Joseph family who lived in Singapore, and they told an amazing story. When the Japanese invaded Singapore in 1942, Mr. Morrison Joseph, who at the time was a driver for the British Admiralty, took Robert Payne to safety outside Singapore. In appreciation, Robert Payne gave Mr. Joseph the Carl Duldig sculpture, Malay Boy. Mr. Morrison Joseph had since passed away, but the bronze portrait bust was kept by his family for all the intervening decades. In 2009, this first Singapore bronze cast of my father's Malay Boy sculpture was acquired by the Singapore Art Museum from the Joseph family for its permanent collection. A happy ending to an incredible story. The drawing of a Buddhist priest, the patriarch Hui Neng, was also completed by Carl in Singapore. Note the signature and the date. From the fine calligraphy alongside, which was done by the sitter after the drawing was finished, we learn that Carl was introduced to this venerable man by Yu Ta Fu, a famous Chinese writer who was one of the founders of modern Chinese literature. This photo shows Carl with both men and with me outside our house in Singapore at the time when the drawing was done. Hui Neng was very orthodox and would not eat or drink in our place. He came on 2 consecutive days, and the second time brought enormous oranges as a gift. He gave my father a carved Chinese jade seal, under which, in Chinese calligraphy, Carl's name had been incised. On the second visit, Carl did a smaller drawing, which showed the priest in a standing pose. Apart from their historical significance in the story of our family, these drawings demonstrate Carl's ability to adopt the local materials for his work, and in many drawings completed in Singapore, he uses Indian ink and sometimes a quill pen. Carl was fascinated by masks and often tried out new techniques and styles in this genre. Using clay, he could spontaneously model his ideas, and each of these masks was done at different times and in varying circumstances. There are many other examples of this genre in the museum and in the artist's studio. For a short period after my mother died in 1975, my father worked in a new medium. He was given sheets of beehive wax by his friend Norman Redpath of Redpath Apiaries, and working with a candle in the kitchen of this house, he modelled this set of small figures. Because the wax was to be cast in bronze and attached to stone bases, Carl was able to explore entirely new ways of constructing the figures. He deliberately left traces of the original hexagonal patterning of the beeswax sheets as a distinctive texture on the surface of these sculptures. Some of the sculptures on the table are included in the museum's Bronze Editions catalogue and have become popular collector's items. This bookcase is one of the items of furniture designed in Vienna in 1930 by Sigmund Jarre, a leading Viennese art house furniture designer and workshop. Note the red leather trim on the keys, which matches the red leather upholstery of the chairs in the sitting room. The photo on the table shows the bookcase in the sitting room of the Duldig family apartment in Enzingergasse 3 in Vienna in 1931. In the photo, the cocktail cabinet was full of small sculptures, like it is here. Some of the books on the shelves are the same ones that were on the shelves in Vienna before the war. The lower head on the bookcase shelves was done in Switzerland by my father when I was 8 months old. The other head was modelled in Singapore when I was 2. We left Vienna in 1938, and the bookcase was among the furniture and works of art from our apartment in Vienna, taken to Paris by my aunt, Aurélie Lenné. They were safely hidden in the cellars of her apartment house, at great personal risk to her and her French husband during the wartime occupation of Paris by the Nazis. Almost miraculously, and over a period of 6 decades, everything was eventually returned to our family here in Melbourne.